Stop blaming your crew. I know it's super easy when you have high food costs to immediately blame your crew or your restaurant staff, but usually that's not the problem. You know, it's us. So today's restaurant excellence lesson of the day is is how to use a stat report. When I first became a GM, my supervisor told me about the stat report. Mind you, this is 20 something plus years ago, and wasn't very good at explaining it to me. So I had to really look at it and figure out what all those numbers meant on my stat report. Because there is a lot of information on there, and at the time, like I said earlier in my other video, I started off with bad food costs. The restaurant I took over wasn't the greatest, so it was a challenge to trying to fix the problem, and not knowing what the problem was, and then after that, a stat report that I didn't know how to read and I didn't understand, I spent a lot of time doing things that really just wasted my time, and it took me longer to figure out what the problem was. So not until I actually learned how to read that stat report is when I saw the difference. So my friends, here are the 3 things you need to do with your stat report. Number 1, focus on the top dollar items on your stat report. If you read it, it'll tell you what the most expensive items are that you're missing the most of. That again, that's going to be your high ticket items like your chicken, your beef products. That's going to be your high ticket items. So that's where you want to focus your time on, not the little salt packets that really don't cost much and don't add up to a huge loss on your stat report. Now, on the other hand, those other items, those are the ones you really want to focus on. Start with that, my friends. Look at your stat report. What are the high ticket items? And start fixing those. And the second one, my friends, start looking at the use difference number. That's the one that's going to tell you what items you're extremely plus on or extremely minus on. Obviously, if it's extremely plus, there's inaccuracy problems there, so you need to go check that. But if you're missing a lot of a product and it's telling you that on the use difference, now I'm not telling you that that's where now you go assign blame or look for somebody to blame. You need to go and look at the processes. Why are you missing those food items? So you start asking questions. Get to the root of the problem. Why are you missing those items? And again, start looking at all your routines, all your processes to see why. And the last thing that you want to use your stat report for is to look for trends, my friends. If you see the same things week after week after week, then you should be paying attention to that. And go and look at the procedures. Start coaching. If you have one bad week, still correct that. But if you definitely see a trend, is like week after week you're missing French fries, then there's a problem. You might want to go look at the entire process from the delivery to storage to the actual storage on at the fryer to procedures cooking it, and then preparing it after that, and then serving it to our guests. Along the way, there's something has to be broken, so you start looking at that, and you want to do that with every single product. So you look at your use difference, what items are missing, and start looking at the trends, and find out what processes are not the standard. So my friends, the stat report is not to tell you what the problems are. It's to tell you where to start looking, and then from there, once you know what you're missing and what what you need to be looking at, you start looking at the processes. Are you coaching? Are you training? Are you following up? What systems do you have in place? So again, the stat report can be your friend if you know how to use it right. It shows you where to start looking. So my friends, today's restaurant excellence lesson of the day is don't just print your stat report just to have it there handy and to show it to your teams. Use it to find clues onto what's going on in your operation. And once you have those clues, now it's up to you to start going, asking questions and looking at your processes in your operations. And remember, you're only as good as your last visit. Stop blaming your crew, and I'll see you on the next one.